Begin the current Daf, this Eruvin Daf Ayin Alf. Begin on the bottom of Ayin Mabez, 2 lines up at the bottom of the Yomit. We continue the discussion of the previous Daf regarding the halachas of a Yerush being Mabatal on Shabbos. Shish corresponds to the Kazik and the Chesed to any time Daf HaChaim. Pisham is joining us for today's Daf. Somebody is going to discuss in today's Daf one who inherits a house on Shabbos, like we call the Yerush, could he be Mabatal the Rishus or not? Which that leads into a machlekes regarding Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg regarding if you're allowed to do bittul rishus on Shabbos or not. Some of the other ideas on today's daf are regarding neighbors who have a partnership in owning food, let's say a barrel of wine. Do they need to make a separate shit to mavois, or that already consider that they're partners in what they have? And two key terms and concepts are tful, someone who has this quasi state of tahara, he went to the mikvah, but he still needs to wait for nightfall. And shemesh tzapik of yain, if you have oil floating on wine, is that considered as connected as one entity, or is it considered two different entities? So we begin the card daf. Ayin Mabez, 2 lines up at the bottom of the Yomit. We continue the discussion in the previous stuff. The opinion of Rav Nachman was that one who inherits a house on Shabbos, he didn't have it from before Shabbos, he was not able to join the Eruvin, but he could be about Loshos, because the guy that he inherited from was able to make an Eruvin, he didn't, and that person would be able to do bittul, so the Yerush could also go ahead and do bittul. And the Gemara continues asking on Rav Nachman. We had asked one question on the previous stuff. The Gemara asked him another brisa, and it's going to give a similar type of an answer. Tashma, the brisa is going to be actually a little bit terse, a little bit difficult to interpret, and the Gemara is going to interpret it. And then after we finish interpreting, that's where the Gemara is going to ask the question. The brisa says like this: Tashma, Yisrael v'ger. If you have a Jew and a convert, now a ger shemeis, a convert who dies and doesn't have any children, so there's no Yerushim because he's not related to anybody. So whoever goes quickly and grabs his stuff first, he gets to keep his stuff. So you have a Yisrael and a ger, shurim b'magur achas. They were living in one granary, which is like a silo that had different rooms, and each one had a different opening to the courtyard, and therefore they would make it forbidden one or the other. They can't in the courtyard because they're considered as different domains in the same courtyard. Now, amazing by joy. Now, if the ger dies from before Shabbos, so we continue the daf on top and daf Ayin Minal. So the words are going to be hard to translate, but the Gemara is going to amend it to a new understanding. So if he dies from before Shabbos, so even if another Jew goes, like the ger and the Yisrael, they're in the Eruv together. But if he dies from before Shabbos, now even if another Yisrael, anyone could go chop his assets now. If another Jew goes and grabs his assets, which the Gemara is going to ask, what's even so? To the contrary, if another Jew goes ahead, not even so, if another Jew goes and grabs it, it's going to make it forbidden on the one who grabs it is going to make it forbidden on the one who lives over there, because now there's some other guy, some other Yisrael who has rights over here who's not part of the Eruv. But we'll amend it in a second. But if let's say the Yisrael only takes possession of it, the ger only dies once it's already Shabbos, then the Eruv of the ger with the Yisrael already took effect from before Shabbos because it happens by Ben Hashmashas. So then Afa Pishul Hisli Yisrael Acher. So even if another Yisrael did not take possession of it, and the Gemara is going to ask what's even so, it's only then. But if Yisrael didn't, even though he didn't take possession of it, Eina Oyster is not going to make it forbidden. Which, like we said, the Gemara is going to ask, what do you mean? When he doesn't take possession, then to the contrary, the only one who's living over there is that Yisrael, and no one took possession of the ger's assets, says no one can make it forbidden on him. So it should have said in the brisa, not Afa Pishech Yisrael, the first case. It said Im Hifzig Yisrael Achim Nechasel Eisa. What's Afa Pi? So the Gemara is going to ask this right now. Haguva Kasha. So I don't understand how to read this brisa. Amrit, you said the opening case was if the convert died mipa said he died from before Shabbos. So you told me, even though another Yisrael goes and takes possession of it, even in such a case, he's going to make it forbidden, right? Because the Yisrael took possession of it. Now he's not part of the Eruv with this Yisrael, and the guy can't carry in his chatzana. For what, you're going to tell me, Avapi sounds like even so, it's a bigger chiddush. And what, I don't have to tell you, if another Yisrael did not take possession, then it is going to be asur? To the contrary. If nobody takes possession of this convert's assets, so lo yasar, it's not going to be forbidden because there's no one here. It's just these Yisrael and the dead ger. So why say Avapi? What's Avapi? So Avapi says no. Amy, you're right. Say Avapi shaloi hifzik. It shouldn't be Avapi shehifzik. Even if no one took possession from before Shabbos and he waited till it got dark, and so therefore, since there was part of Shabbos that was permitted, even so, he's going to make it forbidden, as the Gemara is going to explain shortly, since he had the ability to take possession from before Shabbos if he wanted to. So it comes out that this domain of the ger was what's called Tului by Mendes, so it's like a little bit hanging in the balance. So it's not really considered Hutul Mitzvah Shabbos. We're going to explain this shortly as the Gemara is going to re-amend it. But first he's saying, no, don't read the Afa Pishech Yisrael Achal. It's not Afa Pi, that's for sure, that another Jew takes possession. No. Even if he didn't take possession, no one took possession of it before Shabbos, He only took possession of it, let's say, when Shabbos already started, so then it should be mutter, right? Because that's kimin shehutcher mixed with Shabbos. No, it's going to be aseh. Because he had the ability, he could have, and since it was already a reyes, it was already flaw, he could have taken possession, so that's already going to make it problematic. But the Gemara first asks, how can you say what you just said? But it doesn't say Av B'Shaloi Hirsik, it says Av B'Shaloi Hirsik. How can you tell me Shaloi Hirsik? So it says the Gemara, this is what the Brisa means to say. Now, a word's missing. When it says Af Al Pi, it's not going on the next words of Shehirsik Yisrael. It's going on Af Al Pi, like we explained, Shaloi Hirsik. So why say Hirsik? It should have said Shaloi Hirsik. No, Hirsik means to say Hoyeloi Laharsik. Af Al Pi Shehirsik, that's Af Al Pi, and then Shehirsik is that he could have been Machzik. So that's what the Gemara explains. Af Al Pi Shaloi Hirsik Mibayayim. No, he did not take possession. This other Yisrael. We'll call him Reuven and the Ger and Shimon. There's Reuven and the Ger living, and then there's this other Yid Shimon. Even though he did not take possession of the Ger's assets, of his property, of his house, from before Shabbos, only when Shabbos started. So wait, that should be permitted, right? Why are you saying it's not? It should be permitted because no one, when Bein HaShemashos, when the Eretz take effect, when the Shvisa happens, there's no one here. No. Even the Havalela Hasim Mibayoim, since that other Yisrael Shimon could have taken possession, it was a free for all. Whoever wants to grab the convert's assets can take it. So Isur therefore is going to be forbidden because already considered flawed in the Chatzar that it's not something that's considered one person, because whoever wants to can take possession of it, and therefore already that is considered as a problem in the Chatzar. So that's how you're supposed to read it. No one took possession of it when he died before Shabbos, but he could have. Av B'Shehechzik means even though he could have been Machzik, still it's going to be awesome. And then now we can understand the Sefer, which has the same type of question.
I'm going to amend it. It's just one word.
Good question. Right, but it is, a lot of times they don't want to say the exact opposite.
Yeah, right.
The one word is saying the exact opposite. Shehirzik, shaloyirzik, such a toys, a grace of toys. But to say shehirzik means that sometimes they can be stable more. Then the Sefer says, oh, okay, if the convert died when it was already dark, when it was already Shabbos, the words of the Brisa are that even though another Yisrael did not take possession, it's not going to make it forbidden. Says the Gemara, how you read the words. What? Even though another Yisrael was not Machzik, it's still going to be mutter. What? But let me buy, and I don't have to tell you, that if another Yisrael took possession, that for sure it's going to be mutter? To the contrary, if anything, anything when he takes possession, that should be more problematic because there's another Yisrael over here who did not join the Eib. Why are you saying Afal Pi Shaloi Hifzik? It's not Afal Pi if he didn't. To the contrary, if he did take possession, then actually maybe it would be awesome. So my Papa says, you're right, same type of answer. Aim must say Afal Pi Shehifzik. No, you're right, don't say Afal Pi Shaloi Hifzik. It's even if he took possession, but since it was already Shabbos, he's not going to make it forbidden because you say, since part of Shabbos is already permitted, it's going to remain permitted. Then he asks the same question. But you told me the word shalai. How can you say Av B'Shehechzik? It says Av B'Shehechzik, even though he didn't take possession. So the Gemara again, the same type of an answer. There's words missing. When it says Afal Pi, it's not going on shalai hechzik. It's going on that he was machzik. And what it says the word shalai hechzik. What it means to say is since he could not have been able to take possession from before Shabbos, because he had no rights in Bein HaShemashos, because that Bein HaShemashos was in the possession of the convert. The ger only died once it was already Shabbos. And if this guy would have come to take possession of it, he would not have been able to. So therefore, there was a moment of permissibility for part of Shabbos, because he could not have taken possession of it then, and therefore it's not going to make it usher, even though he is machzik. And this is how you're supposed to read the Brisa. That even though he took possession of it once it's already dark, but the words Ava B'Shehechzik is he could not have been taking possession of it from before Shabbos. So Enais is not going to make him a bit. Again, that was a pretty complicated Gemara discussion how to explain the Brisa, but that wasn't the main point of the Gemara. The main point is the Gemara's question right now. But one thing is that we learned in the Reisha with the way we amended it. Was that if the ger died from before Shabbos, and the Yerush goes ahead and he takes possession of it, even if it's by nighttime, because he could have taken possession of it from before Shabbos, Al Kapanim Ois is going to make it forbidden on that other Yisrael. To ask the Gemara Rav Nachman, Amai Oiser, why is it forbidden? Nivatel, let that other Yisrael who takes possession. That's good. Now it's off.
No, it's not. It's off.
It's off. The gulas. Turn it off. So the question is, so why are you saying that it's going to be aser nevatel? Why don't you go ahead and you just make bittel? You're right. You obviously cannot join the Eruv because you didn't have possession of it from before Shabbos. So you're saying that he's going to make it aser because he could have, but go ahead. You're a Yairish, and the Yairish is allowed to go ahead and do bittel. Says the Gemara, same type of answer as we said before. My what does it, as we said in the previous stuff? What does it mean that it's aser? It means achivatel until he goes ahead and does bittel. But you're right. Once he does bittel, then it's going to go ahead and it's going to be mutter. It just means to say until he does bittel, it's going to be aser because he did take possession of it. Even though it's only after Shabbos, you're not going to say keep in George because he could have taken possession of it from before Shabbos. Now, Rabbi Yochanan, he actually answers this question and the Gemara's question in the previous stuff. He says masni asa, the two brides that we had asked from, that both of them we were saying that the Yerush is going to make it aser. So he had asked, why, according to Nachman, why is the Yerush making it aser? He should be able to do bittul. If Nachman holds the Yerush could do bittul, he says, you know what? It's not difficult from the two brises. You know who the time the two brises are? It's Beishamahi. Who da'ami ain't bittul rishus b'Shabbos. Beishamahi says you can't do bittul rishus on Shabbos at all. And of course, then a Yerush cannot do bittul on Shabbos. That's not like we learned in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, when are you allowed to give your rights in the domain, which is what we call this halacha bittul? Has to be from before Shabbos. It has to be from before Shabbos. Therefore, you can't do it on Shabbos. They say you can do it from when it's already dark, and therefore it's not typical of Nachman from the two brises. The reason why you can't do bittul is because it's only going to happen on Shabbos. The Yerush could do bittul on Erev Shabbos, but Beis Shammai holds you can't do it all on Shabbos. No one, not the father, not the Yerush, not anyone, and therefore it's not difficult on Rav Nachman. Now, Amar Ula, once we introduced actually this machlekes Beis Shammai from our Mishnah. So he says, my time of the Beisil, what's the reason Beisil that they allow you to do the bittul, what's called Nesinas Rishus, even on Shabbos? So it says the Gemara, because Nasa Ko'im Meklach Etzel Yafas, a very interesting answer. The halacha is, when someone is taking off truma of his friend's produce without his awareness, so there's a Bryce in Bab Metzidaf Chabezim now says, if let's say the homeowner comes and he finds that the guy took up truma from his produce, and he tells him, Klach Etzel Yafas, go to the better stuff. Why are you taking off truma for the coin? You're taking this. You take the top quality, give it to the kain. So on that, the Gemara says over there, if there are better ones, so then it's a good truma because he's revealing his intention that he was okay with what the guy had done. Because we say that it says if he had made him a shliach from before. So here also says the Gemara, this is what Beisil holds. Since the guy's doing bittul right now, he's revealing his intention that initially that he wanted it to be permitted for the other guys to carry. It's just that he forgot to join the Erev. So therefore, it's not like he's really going and doing a kinyan of the Rishus, which is what the Gemara assumes bittul is according to everyone, therefore has a difficulty myself on Shabbos, because it's to the contrary, it's like klach etzel yafas. When you come and the guy to do truma, it has to be Rishus, it has to be your shliach. Can't do it shlei Rishus, it has to be. So how does it work klach etzel yafas? Because you should, and then you're revealing your intent. That's what you always wanted. So here also, when you're doing the bittul on Shabbos, you really wanted it to be permitted from before Shabbos. You forgot to join the Erev. But you could do the bittul on Shabbos because it's not like really happening on Shabbos. It's like having from before Shabbos. That's the Gemara answer to Beisil. The problem is, on Abaye says that wouldn't work in every case. Because Meis Nachri b'Shabbos, when the non-Jew dies on Shabbos, where you cannot say that was retroactively your intention because it has nothing to do with you. My klach etzel yafasika. There are many Amiram that hold you could do bittul even when you could not have done it from before Shabbos because there was a Nachri, and you can't do an Erev with the Nachri. But if he dies on Shabbos, then you can do bittul. How can you do bittul? There's no klach etzel yafas. There's no retroactivity over there because it has nothing to do with it. The Nachri is holding it up. So rather, this says the Gemara, you're right. What the machlekes b'Shabbos is a different concept. And this is a very important concept in understanding how bittul works. The Beis Shammai, they hold bittul rishus. What is the nullification of your rights in the courtyard? Is mikne rishusu. It's an acquisition of a domain. Mikne rishus b'Shabbos also, but to go ahead and acquire a domain on Shabbos is forbidden because it's similar to mekach amemker, to doing a business deal, which you cannot do on Shabbos. The Beisil hold it's permitted to do it on Shabbos because it's taluke rishus ba'amu. All you're doing is removing yourself from the area. To remove yourself, you're allowed to do. You're not doing any king, you're not no mekach memker, and therefore that's the machlekes b'Shabbos. You're allowed to do that on Shabbos, and that's what the Gemara was saying before regarding entering the brises on Rav Nachman. That I was going like Beis Shammai holds you cannot do bittul on Shabbos. If it's not difficult, why the Yerush can't do it? Because Yerush could do, but no one could do it because it's on Shabbos. It's going like Beis Shammai. Now we continue to halacha. The next Mishnah continue on this theme of shituf and mevayis, of joining together in the same mavoi. So the Mishnah says, if you had a homeowner who is a partner with his neighbors in the same mavoi, And generally a partnership, not for the purposes of shituf mavais. Not like we're going to join one to make an eruv of alleyways together, of neighborhood. Stop. He was partners. Lezebayayin. He had, for this neighbor, he had a partnership. We bought a barrel of wine together. It was on sale in Costco, a big barrel of wine. And I wasn't going to buy Costco size myself. I said, we'll go together. We're going to share together. So with this one with wine and with this one, the Gemara is going to explain this all in one vessel. So in the tzricha l'arb, they don't have to make an eruv together. They don't have to make a shutuf mavos, because we're anyways joined together with this barrel of wine, which is what we would have done anyways for shutuf mavos. Now, but let's say let's say with one neighbor. When I say neighbor, I don't mean the house. I mean the next neighboring alleyway, or the next chutzner. So with one, it's with wine, and with one, it's with oil. Now, that's not really one shituf, because it's with two different types of entities, and it's in two different vessels, so that you cannot rely on as a shituf mavos. And if it's tzricha l'arb, then you would have to go ahead and make a separate eruv, a shituf mavos. Shimon, he disagrees. He says, no, echad. He goes, no. Either one of these cases, whether it's both with wine or one with wine, one with oil, in a tzricha l'arb, you don't have to make a new eruv. It's enough the shituf mavos that you have with the barrel of wine and the barrel of oil. Now, Amar Rabbi qualifies this teaching of the Mishnah. It says b'kli echad. It says it's talking about one vessel, meaning all the neighbors, they had joined together in this one barrel. But if in two vessels, it wouldn't work. Now, as Rashi explains, although the Gemara said previously that Beis Hillel holds that an eruv that's placed in two vessels is valid. So it says Rashi, important differentiation. He says there, initially it was collected for the purposes of being an eruv. And then it overflowed, you couldn't fit in, so you put into another one, therefore it's going to work. But over here, it wasn't, you didn't join together for the purposes of a shituf mavos. So then it's going to be, has a more stringent requirements, then it has to be only one vessel, but in two vessels it's not going to work. Now, Amar Rav, he says, Dekanami says a precise reading of the Mishnah indicates, like Rav, that has to be one vessel, that's where it's going to work. Because the Ketani will learn in the Mishnah that says, and if let's say with one neighbor he has with wine, and with one it's with oil, then tzricha l'arb, then it's not going to work, then you have to make a separate eruv. Now, if you say like Rav, that ratio that the ratio which we said is going to work because this one's with one and this one's with one, and it's all in the same vessel, all in the same barrel. And the safe Mishnah Kalim, and the safe one is with one wine, one with oil. It's in two different vessels. I understand why one's going to work, one's not going to work, because one's in the same barrel and one's in two different barrels. But if you say the ratio of both neighbors being with wine, and the Sefer Shnei came and one being with wine, one being with oil, so Mali Yain B'Yain, Mali Yain B'Shem. So what's the difference? If they're both talking about in two barrels, so why with wine is going to work and wine with oil is not going to work? If it's anyway two different barrels. So Amalei Bai says, no, it's not a proof. Yain B'Yain, when they're both wine, even though they're two different barrels, Ra'u La'ara. It's fit to mix them together. So therefore, even if you didn't mix them, you could still rely on it as if all joined together. Yain B'Shem and Ra'u La'ara. But wine and oil, you can't mix together, and therefore, it's not a proof to what Rob's saying. Could be it's really in two different vessels. But still, you could say that we're like joined together because we could have mixed it together. Wine and oil, you're not mixing together, and therefore that's why it wouldn't work. So it's not a raya, but that's what Rav qualified. He says, come on, that it's in one vessel. That's when we say that they could all be joined together. Now, that was the opinion of the Tanakh. Rabbi Shimon, he disagrees. He says, no, echad ain't tzricha l'arb. He says, no, even if it is joined together with one neighbor with oil and one with wine, even that's going to be, we don't have to make a shituf mavos, we're all considered joined together. So the Gemara says, is that really silver? One with wine with one oil, but that's not fit to mix together. The whole point of the shituf mavos is all neighbors would consider mixed together, but if it's one wine, one with oil, so we're not all mixed together. How can you say that's a shituf mavos? Some Rabbi says that Hachma Iskina, what are we talking about over here? Is b'chasa shebein shtei mavos. We're actually talking about a courtyard, this middle courtyard in the picture, that's between two different alleyways. And we're not talking about that they're joining with a shituf of one mavoi. Rather, this middle guy, this middle chatzar, he's joining with one chatzar, meaning in that mavoi, with oil, and with one with wine, and they're two different eruvin. Rabbi Shimon goes according to his reasoning that he says that one courtyard can make two eruvin with two different mavois, even if those two mavois did not join together. So that's what we're saying over here. Even if the shitub is not joining them together, and those mavois are not mutu one with the other, the middle chatzar is permitted with both of them. And the chiddush in that is, we're not geyser that if we're going to let you go ahead and carry from this middle courtyard to them, we might come to get from one mavi to the other one through the middle courtyard. That's Rabbi Shimon's opinion. That's his Rabbi Shimon l'shitas over here. That we're not concerned for that. And that he can make two different shituvim mavois with his two chatzeres. It's not like we learned this already in the Mishnah of Mehayim base. Amar Rabbi Shimon says, "Lamada b'daima." This was in Perek Mishnah Tziyu, where we were told about three people on the road. that we said the guys on the road, since they don't really have a tchum because they didn't know where they are, they only get daled amas, and we said if their daled amas are overlapping each other, he says, what could this be compared to? L'sholosh chatzeres hapsuchas lezu. The 3 courtyards, which is essentially the case we're like describing over here. 3 courtyards that open one to the other. They have separate openings to Rosh Hashanah. So he said, if the 2 outer ones make an Eruv with the middle one, so he mutars in one, so then the middle one's permitted with them, the he mutars in one, they're permitted with it. Now the 2 outer ones are forbidden one with the other. That is the case that we're describing over here, that they're not joined together because this is oil, the middle one with the left one, and wine with the middle one and the right one. So the outer ones with the middle ones are permitted, and the middle one with the outer ones, but the outer ones with each other are not permitted. They're not joined together because one is oil and one is wine. That's the chiddush of Reb Shimon's opinion that's going to work. Because according to the Rabbanan of the Mishnah, if let's say, as we described in the Mishnah, one is with wine, one is oil, then it's as if the 2 mavos are joined together, and then it's actually when they're both with wine. We said the Rabbanan disagree with Reb Shimon. If they both would be wine, so we said they're all going to work. But if one's with wine, one's with oil, then the 2 Eruvin, and since the 2 mavos are forbidden one with the other, so then actually the middle one's going to be forbidden with the 2 of them. And that's what we learn in Perek Mishatzir, because you can't dance on by the chasnas. You can't say that you're an area for both places. That's where the Rabbanan disagree. This case, that only Reb Shimon said, but the Tanna Kama says that's not going to work, is even in this case of when the middle one's doing with one with wine, one with oil, it's only Reb Shimon B'Shitasa holds that that's going to work, and you could be an Eruv with 2 different mavos. According to Rabbanan, even that case, as we're describing, that's not going to work, and that's the machlekes we have between Reb Shimon and the Rabbanan. However, Abai rejects this. He says, "Mi dummy. How can you compare Reb Shimon in our Mishnah to that Reb Shimon that we're bringing from the Mishnah of Mehei? Hasam Ketani, there, what are the words as we just quoted? He says, he says, the outer courtyards have forbidden one with the other. The words in our Mishnah are that Reb Shimon says, both cases, whether this neighbor made with both with wine or one with wine, one with oil. It says, in you don't have to make an Eruv. It sounds like you have to make an Eruv at all, which sounds like everyone's permitted one with the other. But the case you're comparing it to the Mishnah of Mehei sounds like you can't just say they don't have to make an Eruv. It's only the middle guy is permitted, but everyone's not permitted. So says the Gemara, no, it's not difficult. What does it mean you don't have to make an Eruv? It means Shchein B'Hadi Balabais. It means the neighbors, the 2 outer courtyards with the homeowner, the guy we're discussing in the middle. But the neighbors one with the other. Meaning, in other words, if the people of one mavi wanted to use the other one, then they would have to go ahead and make an Eruv, and everyone would have to put bread into the middle courtyard. And if it's not difficult in that interpretation of Rabbah that to explain the halacha of Reb Shimon, what's the case of echad zed and tzurich la'am? He said, how could that be? How could you have wine and oil? They don't mix together. So how could everyone join together? He says, no, it's not all joined together. It's this case of Reb Shimon l'shitasei that the middle one is going to be permitted with the outer ones, or even though the outer ones are going to be forbidden with the middle ones, and that's what the Rabban disagree in our Mishnah. They said, no, that's not going to work, as they disagree, as we brought it in Perek Mishatzir. Now, to Ahmed Beis, the Gemara gives another interpretation. He actually says that we're talking about one mavi, as we originally had understood. And then you had asked, if that's the case, according to Reb Shimon, how could it be one Eruv? One neighbor's giving wine, one neighbor's giving oil. There are 2 different things. How could that be considered all joined together in one Eruv? And that says the Gemara, because it's beplukta Reb Shimon b'Rabbanan, beplukta Reb Yochanan ben Nur b'Rabbanan. It's an interesting comparison to a machlekes we have that now. The Mishnah set this tool yet. The Mishnah says, shemen, if someone has oil, shetzafa gavayayin, that's floating on wine, and they're both truma. Now, the nugget tful yom b'shemen, like we described in the introduction, tful yom is someone that has a quasi state of tumah / tara, where he already immersed himself in the mikveh. Tful yom, he immersed that day, but he's not tar yet totally because he didn't have harav shemesh, didn't have sundown. So the halacha is that he contaminates, but he only contaminates what he touches. It only makes it like into a rishon. It doesn't go any further. So if you have this v'nugget tful yom b'shemen, the tful yom touches the oil, and the oil is floating on the wine. So the Tanna Kama says le'pasal l'shemen b'vad. It only makes it into a sheni. It only makes it the oil is going to be tummy, and it's not going to pass it on any further. It's only when he touches it becomes tummy. Now, Rabbi Yochanan he says no shnei chiburin zelz. We consider them both connected, and therefore not only is the oil going to become tummy, but the wine is also going to become tummy. So that's the machlekes in our Mishnah. Rabbanan, Rabbanan, our Mishnah who hold that when you have one with oil and one with wine, that it's not going to work because they consider 2 different entities. Rabbi Shimon is like Rabbi Yechim He holds that shemen and yain is like one. When you're touching the oil, the wine is also considered as if it was touched, because to pass on, the petroleum doesn't have the ability to pass on what he was metame. But it says one entity. So in our Mishnah too, lezeb yain, lezeb shemen, we would consider them as mixed in together as one entity, and therefore that's why the halacha would be in our Mishnah would be considered as one mixture, as one thing together.
Together, it's two separate.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, but even if let's say it was
They're in one vessel, so you say, okay, even though the oil floats, but it's together.
Right.
But here you're talking about two separate entities.
Right, so that depends if it has to be b'kliyecha, the b'shnei kelim, or ro for that. But the point is, it would be considered as one element, one entity. If you hold that the shemesh itself agabayayin would be mixture, or if it wouldn't be mixture, then it wouldn't help to be considered as ro.
That's the point. That's the point.
Right.
Not because I can just get the mechibah part.
Right. So that, yeah, in the Konami, there's that definitely what does the mechibah do? Obviously, we consider it as one entity. It's considered connected. What? Right. Yeah. So I'm saying that's the question. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. We have an Amid Aleph. If it's row for that, if it's fit to do that, and if it's in one vessel, for sure. But the other mandam will hold even if it's in one vessel, it's not going to be considered mixed. We're not mixed because it's not connected on any level. The whole point of a sheet of an Eruv is that we're mixed together. So that's where we have the machlekes. Does it have to be in one house, in two houses, in one vessel? Of course, it could be fit to be mixed. But al kapanim, if you have the element of mechuber, on some level we'll be able to be mixed together. But if not, it's not connected at all, and therefore that would be the machlekes. Now, so far we have quoted two different opinions. Now the Gemara brings a third opinion in relation to the halachas of our Mishnah. Tani Libna Bryce Rabbi Lazar ben Tedoyim, he says, echad ze ve'echad ze tzrichen la'arv. He says, both cases, you have to make a new eruv. Meaning we had the Tanakam who says, only if everyone has wine, then it's going to be considered mixed. Wine and oil, no. We had Rabbi Shimon who says, no. He says even wine and oil is going to be considered mixed. Now, Rabbi Lazar ben Tedoyim is the most stringent. He says, both, even if everyone's sharing a wine, you have to make a new eruv. It's not going to work. So the Gemara asks, even if everyone has mixed together in wine, you would have to go ahead and make a new eruv. Why would that be? You already have everyone's mixed with wine. We're all joining together. So Amar Rabbi explains. He says, you're right. If this guy comes from his house with his pitcher of wine and he pours it into the barrel, and this guy comes from his house with a pitcher of wine and he pours it into the barrel until the barrel gets filled up, then you're right. Says Rashi, even if they did not do this originally for the purposes of shituf, it's kulam pligid haver. No one's going to disagree that you can rely on it because everyone brought their own wine from their house and we're all joined together, and therefore there's no reason why we'd have to make a new shituf. Ki pligid the homachligis was kigun shlekachay. We bought a barrel of wine in partnership. So everyone chipped in, says, okay, we're going to Costco, we're going to buy this barrel of wine. Who wants to be part of the Eruv? We're making an Eruv, making a sheet of mavais. Now that's the machlekes. What's the machlekes? Rabbi Lazar ben Tedoyim, he holds ein breira. There's no retroactive clarification. So it's like they joined together with monies, because no one ever verified which was their wine. Well, my wine's on the top right, and your wine's in the top left, and yours in the bottom right. No one knows which is theirs. So therefore, I never really had my wine to say that I joined together. There's no breira to say that I have. I don't have wine over here. Where do I show my wine? I have money over here that I joined, but I can't verify that I have wine over here. Therefore, it's not going to work, and we have to do a special eruv for shetufim avos. With Rabban Sari, they hold yesh breira, there is verification, and therefore, although we don't know which is yours, we know that there is, and whatever it is that's going to be that you have a claim and you want your wine back, we'll say that was always your wine, and therefore you have wine over there, and therefore already have the sheet of mavois over there, and therefore it's going to work. That's one interpretation. Rabbi Yosef Amar, he says a different explanation of this machlekes. He says, Rabbi Lazar ben Tedoyim Rabbanan, b'soimchin al shitif b'mokem erev knefki. The machlekes actually is regarding a different concept. Could you rely on Shetufim Avayis when you already have an Eruv anyway? That is, Ben Tedoyim agrees that in a Mavai, it's going to be permitted. The whole machlekes was regarding using this wine in Chatzeris, in the courtyards, which is where you need to have an Eruv. Meaning there's two, if you consider in concentric circles, think about houses in the courtyard, and then there's houses in the Mavai. So yeah, it's going to work because the lezebayan, why wouldn't it work? Everyone joined together in wine anyway. Of course it's going to work. But that's going to work as a sheet of mavais. But will it work also for the Eruv Chatzeris of that person's Chatzer? The Maris of Rabbi Lazar ben Tedoyim holds ein samech, and you don't rely on the sheet of mavais to work for Eruv Chatzeris. You got to do, besides the sheet of mavais, the larger area, you got to do your own Eruv Chatzeris. That's not going to work. But the Rabbanan, the other opinions in our Mishnah, they all know, since you made the sheet of Mavois, you don't have to make a Ruba Chatzeres one with the other. And you're permitted to carry out from your chatzah to his chatzah through the openings, because the sheet of Mavois of the larger Mavoi area, of the whole larger area, is open to them and connects them, and you can rely on the sheet of Mavoi in place of the Erev of the chatzah. Whereas Ben Tadoi holds, no, you cannot rely on that. And therefore that's the machlekes. So again, it's not really per se regarding the sheet of Mavois. But Rabbi Elazar Ben agrees to. The only question is, how far does that go? Will that even work for the Rubi Chatzeres or not? And I'm Rav Yosef, who he just said this interpretation, he says, where do I know this? That this is the machlekes of Rabbi Elazar Ben Tadoi. So I'll prove it to you. Because the Amar Yehuda Rav. Rav rules halacha kriyan meir. What does Rav Meir hold? He holds, as we're going to shortly quote him, he holds you don't rely on shituf to take the place of the Erev. Although you have the larger area, what we call shituf mavayis, like the neighborhood, the community Erev, but you still have to make your own neighborhood Erev. Now, the Amar Rav, and another teaching Rav had said, halacha Rabbi Elazar Ben Tadai. So says Rav Yosef, my timer. Why does Rav rule like Reb Meir and Rabbi Elazar Ben Tadai, both of them, Lav Meshod Dechad Taimu, isn't because they're both the same reasoning? Meaning, just like the ruling of Reb Meir is, because that ain't Saimchin al Shitav B'Mokem Erev, so that's why he rules like Rabbi Elazar Ben Tadai, because it's the same halacha of, although Rabbi Elazar Ben Tadai said, well, Zebayan's not going to work. What's the real reason? Is it doesn't really mean it's not going to work as Mavai. It's just not going to work for the Rubi Chatzeres. And I can prove to you, because we see Rav rules like Reb Meir, obviously when he's ruling Rabbi Elazar Ben Tadai, it's the same reasoning. So Abai says, what are you talking about? If it's the same reasoning, then why would Rav have to say the same halacha 2 times? As Rashi explains in a little bit more detail, he says, I understand to say the halacha is like Reb Meir, he had to say, because if he only had the halacha of Rabbi Elazar Ben Tadai, I would have thought to say that the reason Rabbi Elazar is not because you don't rely on shituf, it's because he holds that you can't make a Rubi Chatzeres with wine. As the Gemara brings from Reb Meir later on, that you can't make a Rubi Chatzeres, has to be with bread. But the sheet of a Ben Tadai is with wine, as the Mishnah says, zebayin. So therefore you cannot rely on the Rubi Chatzeres. But I would have thought to say that when they make the shita with bread, then you would rely on the sheet of mavayis for the Rubi Chatzeres. That's what you have to say. Allah is like a mayor, and that's what Rabbi Gidl Marav says later on, that by nishtatev b'pas, that still Rabbi Meir says is going to be forbidden. So I understand why you have to also say Allah is like a mayor. The question, however, is, as Rashi explains, once you tell me Allah is like a mayor, that even by bread we don't rely on sheet of mavayis. So why do I have to say Allah is like a mayor? We're saying even wine is less. Wine is worse. It's more inferior because it's not even bread. There are those who hold that you have to use bread for Rubi Chatzeres. So what's the chiddush of saying both if they're both the same reasoning? To the contrary, saying both would actually say that it's not the reasoning. That says the Gemara. Rabbi Yisrael says no. Hakamash Malan. The reason why he had to tell you both is actually telling you a very interesting chiddush. The loyav dinan kitrei chumer be'ervin. We don't do, from the fact that Rav had to tell us that halacha is like Ben Tadai, we learn out parenthetically that you cannot follow one Tana, one opinion, according to 2 stringencies that he has in the laws of Eruvin. So Rashi explains, Reb Meir essentially saying 2 stringencies. He says that you don't rely on the Rubi Chatzeres, on the sheet of Mavais, whether the sheet of Mavai was done with bread, or whether it was done with wine. Now, the reason for this is because the Rabbanan disagree with him regarding bread. They hold, no, if the sheet of Mavais was made with bread, so then that's going to work for the Rubi Chatzeres, because it's bread. Bread is what you use for the Erev anyway. So why shouldn't it work? But they agree to him regarding wine that wine's not going to work because the Eruv Chatzeres itself doesn't work with wine. How could the Shittim voice of wine work for that of the Eruv Chatzeres? Now, but the Rabbanan in our Mishnah, we explained that they were saying that they agree that Lezebayan is going to work, that was Saimchin, now that's Shittim with wine. And they hold the Shittim of wine is going to work for the Eruv Chatzeres, so it comes out their mayor essentially has 2 machlekesin and he has 2 stringencies. One is that he holds that the sheet of mavoi of bread doesn't work for the Rubi Chatzeres, and one is that he holds the sheet of mavoi of wine doesn't work for Rubi Chatzeres. But Rav holds like Reb Meir on both of them. The problem is he couldn't say that Allah is like him in both, because you cannot say like one opinion with Trei Chumri. And to say like Reb Meir, you're saying a double Chumr. You're saying that the Eruv Chatzeres doesn't work with the sheet of, whether it be of wine or even of bread. So therefore, he first had to say that halacha is like Ben Tadai, to say that you don't rely on, for the halacha of the Rubi Chatzeres, on the sheet of mavoi of wine. And then afterwards, when it comes to the machlekes, remain Rabban regarding bread, then they can say that halacha is like Reb Meir regarding the bread. So you got that? That was just an interesting chiddush, which is, of course he could have just said, why are you saying both? You're saying they're both the same reasoning, and that's how you're proving that's what the Belazman Tadoi is saying, that it's regarding that you don't rely on Shittim Boys regarding Rebbe Chatzeres. You're right. He didn't have to say both, but he had to because he couldn't say like Rameir by both because you're saying like one opinion for straight chumri. So he first had to say Belazman Tadoi regarding Lezebayayin, which is that you cannot use the sheet of Mavois of the larger community Erev of Shittim Mavois of wine for the Rebbe Chatzeres for that to work, and then he could say Rameir's Chiddush, which is a more of a stringency. You can't even use bread of the sheet of Mavois for that of the Rebbe Chatzeres. And then the Gemara just clarifies Meir Banan. What's this machlekes Meir Banan we're quoting? They tell like learn the Bryce. You make an Erev Chatzeres with bread. So if you're joining the house in the courtyard, that has to be done with bread. And if they want to make the Erev with wine, you cannot make an Erev. Rashi explains the reason is because Erev is because of a dira. That is, you're joining their houses to make it as one, as the Gemara said in Daf Yomi. Now, a person's dwelling place is not based on his wine, rather on his bread. So therefore it's not going to work as a Erev Chatzeres. Now, however, you could make shit too from the voice with wine, because when you're joining together the alleyways, you're not joining together people's houses, you're joining people's courtyards together. And therefore, a person, when you're joining the Chatzeres, that's not based on dira, so it's going to work even with wine, because not where I live, it's joining the courtyard, so you can use anything. And for sure bread's going to work, but even wine's going to work. And therefore, if you want to join with bread, of course, mishtatim. Now, but that's where he said that the Erev Chatzeres requires bread, and the sheet of Mavois could even be with wine. Oh, based on that, we understand this opinion, which is that of Rameir that we explained before. Ma'arvin b'chatzeres, you make an Erev of the courtyards, meaning when one courtyard opens up to the other, you join the courtyards, and even though you're made an Erev together through the courtyard, still, you still have to make a shetuv Mavois to permit the Mavoi. Because if not, yes, you're going to be able to go from one courtyard to another, but you're not going to be able to go into the common alleyway, because you don't rely on the Erev to take the place of the Shittiv, and you don't rely on the Shittiv to take the place of the Erev, where if, let's say, the people of the Chatzah did not make their own Erev for themselves, it's not going to work the larger community Shittiv Mavais, it's not going to work for the Erev Chatzeres. Why? So that the laws of Erev should not be forgotten from the children, because if you're going to rely on it, the children are not going to notice that there's an Erev being done. They're going to say, our fathers never made an Erev because they never saw an Erev Chatzeres, because they always relied on the Shittim Mavais. That's Divrei Reb Meir. But if, let's say, every Chatzah made an Erev for themselves and they made a Shittim Mavais, so Rashi explains, even though they did not make a special Erev Chatzeres one courtyard to the other, which is generally you take your Erev Chatzeres and bring it into the other Chatzah, the Shittim Mavai will connect them, and then you could carry from one to the other, whether through the Mavai or through the openings between the Chatzeres. As the Mishnah teaches later on of Ayin Gimel Beis, that the Mavai is for the Chatzeres like the Chatzah is to the bottom. Just like an Erev and the Chatzar makes the houses as one, so the Shetuv and the Mavais makes the Chatzeres as one. In case you got lost over here, was because there's really three different elements. There's making an Erev in the Chatzar itself, then there's making Eruv Chatzeres joining the other Chatzeres together, and then the Shetuv Mavais, which is joining not only the Chatzeres, but you could also carry the Mavai in the alleyway. So Rashi is just addressing that point regarding when you do the Shetuv Mavai, we're saying that you have to do a Eruv Chatzeres because you can forget the laws of Eruv Chatzeres, but you don't have to actually do a special Eruv Chatzeres from one courtyard to the other, because the Shetuv Mavais will encompass that. It won't encompass the Eruv Chatzeres itself, because we want you to make a separate Eruv Chatzeres in your own Chatzar, but you won't have to make a special one from one Chatzar to another one, because that Shetuv Mavais will accomplish. The sages say, no, you don't have to do both. You could either do Eruv or Shituv, and you can rely on one on the other, as we'll explain this on later Dafim. But one thing is that we see that the Chacham hold that you could be Saimech on Shetuv Mavais, B'makam Eruv Chatzeres, and that's Machlekes Rameir and Rabban that we were mentioning before, that Rabbi Yisrael was comparing to Rabbi Elazar ben Tadai, that this Machlekes is regarding the rely on Shetuv Mavais, B'makam Eruv Chatzeres. That was what do you mean? If everyone has wine, why is that not going to work as Shetuv Mavais? So he says, no, it will work. It just means it won't work for the Eruv Chatzeres. That's the Rameir, which again, we had to say both opinions, because Rameir was saying not only that you cannot rely on the wine of Shetuv Mavais for the Eruv Chatzeres, he has you can't even rely on the bread for the Eruv Chatzeres, and that's two Chedushim, and we couldn't say two Chumras of one Tana, therefore we had to say Halacha, Rav had to say Halacha, Elizabeth Tadoi, and he also had to say Halacha is like that of Rameir, which you cannot rely on the Shetuv Mavais of the bread for that of the Eruv Chatzeres. When did we discuss in today's Daf? What? Yeah, that's what Rab's saying. Yeah, we pass like Rameir. Yeah. So somebody did discuss in today's Daf and Eruvin Daf Ayin Alf was we had from the previous Daf of Machlekes if a Yerush could be Mevatel, and we learned in the Brisa and which again, after we edited that brisa with Chesar Mefsar, we said that if the ger died from before Shabbos, but the Yisrael was mafsik only when it got dark, that he's going to make it forbidden. Why is he going to make it forbidden? Shouldn't you say hutra for part of Shabbos? No, since he had the ability. That was what we said. That we said avapisha hifzik. We said it actually was shaloi hifzik, but he was able to be mafsik from before Shabbos. So then it's going to be aser because he didn't join in the Eruv. But the question was, okay, so who could you didn't join the Eruv, but you could be mevatel because you're a Yairish, and not mal Yairish mevatel. So that the Gemara gave two answers. Either that means until he's mevatel, or no, that answers actually the Bryce of the previous Daf too. They're going like Bishami holds that you cannot do bittul rishus on Shabbos. So forget about it. The Yairish can't do bittul because no one could do bittul. He can't do bittul on Shabbos. Whereas according to Beis Hill, we explained what's the understanding. So why could you do bittul on Shabbos? You can't do kinyan on Shabbos. So even because it's like the halacha of truma that we say klach etzel yafis, where it's retroactively clarified that I always wanted it to be like this, so it's not really happening now. It's really retroactively happening from before Shabbos. Or the Gemara ultimately concluded says no. According to Beis Shammai, it's considered like a kinyan. That's why you can't do it on Shabbos. According to Beis Hill, it's just like a silik, just like removing myself. A silik I could do, and never it's permitted to do that bittul on Shabbos. Then we went to the next Mishnah that the Balabais, who is a partner with his neighbors, with each one with wine. So then you don't have to make an Eruv, which Rav explained the Gemara, it's no matter one vessel. But let's say with one with wine and one with oil, then you have to join the Eruv because they're not joined together. The Reb Shimon said, no, in both cases you don't have to go out and make an Eruv. Then we had a third opinion of Elizabeth Dedoy, and the Bryce says, actually with both of them, you have to make a Shittiv Mavai. Now regarding Reb Shimon, so the Gemara wanted to know, how could you not need an Eruv if one has wine and one with oil? How we consider joined together? So he said, it's actually Reb Shimon L'Shitasai that we had in the Mishnah of Lamed Hey, when you had the three courtyards, one opened up the other, we said that you don't have to make an Eruv. What does he mean you don't have to make an Eruv? It means this with his neighbors, with the Balabais. He doesn't have to, because Reb Shimon holds one guy could be in two mevoyes, he could be joined together. But the Shchein, you're right, the two outer courtyards, they actually would have to make an Eruv. They're forbidden. And that's the Chiddush of Reb Shimon, that he holds, well, Zebayan and Zebashem is going to work, it could join together, because the Rabban actually disagree. They'll no, it's not going to work, because they're concerned that if we're going to let you carry from the middle one to the outer ones might carry through the middle one to the outer ones, which they're carrying out of the Eruv. That's the halacha of Reb Shimon. Or a second interpretation, it's an interesting idea, that Reb Shimon is like Reb Yechim and Menuri, that holds wine and oil. When you're having the halachas of truma, they're considered connected, and therefore they are considered as one, and therefore the Zebayan Zebashem is going to be considered valid for Shetuvim Mavais. Now, regarding the third opinion of Rabbi Elazar Tadai, the Gemara explained what's his understanding. Zebayan is not going to work as a Shetuvim Mavais. Why? We'll all drink together anyways. We all have the same barrels together of their old wine. So one interpretation was because they purchased it in partnership. And the old aim braver. So if I came with my jug of wine and you came with your jug of wine, of course that's going to work. Even if we didn't with different buys. But here we purchased a Costco barrel together, and I don't know which is my wine, so therefore we didn't have a sheet of advice. Therefore it's not going to work. And the other madam, hold on, yes, braver. Or no, it's a whole different halacha. Could you rely on shitov? Yeah, of course it's going to work as shitov advice because it will all join the wine. Will that work even for the Eruvin Chatzeris? And then Elizabeth Dedoy holds that no, you cannot rely on the Eruv for the sheet in the voice. Although Madam hold yes. Now, Rav rules like Remeir and like Elizabeth Dedoy. Why? Because it's the same reasoning. But if it's the same reason, why say the same halacha? Oh no, because you can't do like one Manda Amar, two stringencies in the laws of Eruvin, and Remeir is saying two stringencies, and you couldn't say both like Remeir. You had to say one like Elizabeth Dedoy and one like Remeir. First of all, is that you don't rely for the Eruvin Chatzeris on the sheet when it's made out of wine. That makes sense because the Eruvin Chatzeris has to be bread anyway. How could you rely on the sheet of wine? But that's one chumrah. Then another chumrah is regarding bread. That even bread of the sheet of which that works for everyone says that's not going to work because you have to do separate one because shalot v'shakech as Eruvin Atanaikis. Those just two stringencies of Remei. We couldn't say that if we had to say one like Elizabeth Dedoy and one like Remei. But again, that's like a previous interpretation. Elizabeth Dedoy is not going on sheet of of course it's going to work. It's not going to work. I thank you at any time for hosting us.